Okay. I'll let people start logging in. Hello, everyone who's coming in. Oh, Drew, I lost your screen.
Yeah, for whatever reason, Zoom is deciding to crash on me. So, well, we can start, and if I run into this problem, I can, it'll take me 5 minutes to get into the house and get on our house computer and just switch over to that. So I apologize. This is the first time I do this for our slow PDC. I'm present like this all the time, and I'm not sure what's going on. So
Oh, God. We're just lucky tonight.
yeah.
It'll all go smoothly once we get going, I'm sure.
Isn't technology wonderful?
Yeah, it's great when it works, and it's a pain in the butt when it doesn't. So
welcome everyone who's logging in right now to see permaculture and what it's all about. We're here with Drew Carlson. We'll be starting in a few minutes to get everyone a chance to get settled. If you've not been to a Zoom webinar before, you're going to have chat on the bottom and there's Q&A. I would use the chat if you're having technical problems, you need to talk to me. Q&A, use both of them. You can put your questions in any time. We'll read them at the end.
Well, I'm Tom Wenzel, and I'm sort of organizing it. I'd like to welcome all of you to the start of our 14th season of Master Gardeners Presents. And it's been a very popular program, and that's why we keep doing it, because people like it. And while we're waiting for people to sort of drift into this thing, if anyone has any miscellaneous gardening questions, indoor plants, getting ready for spring, now would be a good time to put them on the chat or chime in, whatever.
Okay, I lost my screen. Where am I? Okay, so, well, we'll wait for, I guess, a question already. We haven't gotten a lot of, we have a question, gardening question, Tom. We haven't gotten a lot of snow. How will that affect the growing season?
It isn't as much the growing season as it is the protection that the perennials need from the snow cover. It's not just an insulating factor, but it provides moisture. So the issue that might come up in the spring is that perennials may suffer, may not have survived because they haven't had the protection from the winter. So how it affects the growing season, that's yet to be seen, but you may see a bigger impact on perennial survival rates.
Okay.
yeah, and I know that comes to play in because we raise cattle, and so we have we holistically manage cattle in a perennial pasture-based system. And in the years where we don't get good snow cover, sometimes some of our perennial stuff out in that pasture, yeah, some of it just gets knocked back pretty hard. So yeah.
Okay, so how are you doing with your screen sharing, Drew?
Yeah, I can bring that up, and I will share my screen. And here we go. All right. Can we see it?
I can see it.
Awesome. All right, cool. So would you like me to start then?
Okay, yes, welcome everyone to Introduction to Permaculture. We are here with Drew Carlson, who is the founder of the Wisconsin Permaculture Convergence and owner of Full Circle Designs and Full Circle Farmstead, and he's here to inform us on what permaculture is and how we can use it. So welcome, Drew.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me on. I love doing these talks, and I love helping people figure out what the heck, permaculture is. So just a little bit of background about myself. I'm from just north of Madison in a small town called Rio. I'm currently back on the property that I grew up on, and my partner Susie and I run a farmstead on our property where we focus on healing the soil on our landscape using holistically managed grazing cattle, as well as lots of other cool no-dig, no-till veggie garden practices. And my schooling is college schooling is environmental philosophy. And then I got out of that and I said, okay, I can argue with people about why we need to take care of the planet and how it's important for us and for the systems around us. But I want to know what I can actually do with my hands on the ground and what's practically available, and to get my hands dirty. And so I kind of started down the rabbit hole of getting into permaculture around 2010. Where I watched the case study of this gentleman's property, Zepp Holzer, in the Austrian Alps up by the tree line where he was growing subtropical fruit. And I said, well, what in the heck is going on with this? This should be possible. And so after that, lots of YouTube forum stuff. And then I got keyed into the Madison Area Permaculture Guild, of which I'm a member of and an active participant and have been since around 2010. I also founded the Wisconsin Permaculture Convergence in 2014, which is an awesome weekend event where people come to skill share, build community, and learn about, all things permaculture as well. Let's see. First of all, I'd like to just start off with, I like to start off as well with thanking the people, my mentors, Kate Hybercobb. She's out of Madison. She founded the Madison Area Permaculture Guild, and all of the people that have come before me, not just in permaculture, but in teaching lineages, as well as indigenous lineages as well, too. And ultimately, my partner, Susie Lindner. I could not be doing what I do now and running my business and everything without her in my life and helping. We help each other out immensely, whether it's sharing childcare responsibilities or helping each other out with our businesses. So that's kind of the quick overview with me. I'll keep it as short as I can because I can tend to talk and talk and talk. So let's get rolling. So I do own a permaculture-based or regenerative ag or ecological landscape design and install business called Full Circle Designs. And my contact information is on the screen. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions about resources or getting connected with anybody in your area or events or different classes and things that in Wisconsin that you'd be interested in, because I'm very well connected in this world in Wisconsin. And I'm always happy to chat or share resources and build community. So let's rock and roll. So what is permaculture? So let's see here. This is kind of the long definition. Permaculture is the use of systems thinking and design principles that provide the organizing framework for humans to consciously design landscapes which mimic the patterns and relationships found in nature while yielding an abundance of food, fiber, and energy for provision of local needs. And a kind of a little bit of short and condensed version is the mimicking of natural ecosystem functions in order to provide all of our needs while positively affecting the landscape. So our aim with permaculture is to observe the natural ecosystems around us and watch how those ecosystems function on all different levels, and then try and use those observations to guide our designs when we are installing, everything from garden beds to rainwater harvesting systems to flower beds to ecological habitat, all of those things. Our number one tool is the observation of nature. Permaculture creators, so the two gentlemen who coined the term permaculture are both out of Australia and Tasmania, Bill Mollison and David Holmgren. Bill Mollison was a professor in Australia, and through observing the Aboriginal people in Australia, was introduced to this connection of nature that he didn't feel he got through his university schooling. And David Holmgren was his graduate student, and together they worked on and created the first publications on permaculture. Permaculture 1 was the first book that they released, and it's kind of a good introduction to permaculture. And then later, Bill Mollison released Permaculture, a Designer's Manual, which is a big, thick manual that is very dense, very textbook-like, but is a really great resource. But there are some other resources out there that I'll share as well. In permaculture, we always start with the 3 ethics. So the permaculture, the three ethics of permaculture are care for the earth, care for people, and set limits to consumption and redistribute surplus. So what we mean by care for the earth is very basic, right? We have this deep appreciation for the earth and the systems around us, everything from the living soil, so the microbiology underneath our feet, to the biodiversity. We really want to curate and harbor and promote biodiversity, which is one of the most fleeting things that we have in our on Earth right now is we're losing lots of biodiversity. So we talk a lot about creating habitat, increasing biodiversity, not under the soil as well as above the soil. And it's basically generally we're caring about living things, everything from each other to cattle, to wildlife, to deer, to rabbits, all those different things. And some feel that it's based in the Gaia hypothesis, which is the hypothesis that the earth itself is like a living system. So all the different parts of the earth are integrated, and the more and more we learn about the systems on earth and how they function, all the weather patterns, the nutrient cycling and everything, more and more of this, we're finding out that, well, there is something to that, right? Something that one person does on one continent can have a large effect on another continent as well, or what people do together on one continent can affect other continents. And care for the people. So kind of the two ways we like to think about this is self-care, right? So taking care of ourselves, and also on here, I should probably have this on here, but taking care of others in our community. And a lot of that is focused on non-material well-being. So the things, really focusing on the things that we need in order to be happy, right? We need food, we need water, we need shelter, we need community in order to feel healthy and feel satisfied. And we need that connection between other people. And so permaculture very much started focused on like a land-based kind of frame of thought about how to grow food and in a way that nature, that follows natural patterns and the way that nature operates. But since then, we found that a lot of these ethics and these principles that we use in permaculture also can be used in the social systems as well. So here, and then setting limits to consumption and redistribute surplus. So this really comes down to noticing the abundance that nature offers if we work with in congruence with nature, but then also there are some realistic limits as well. And then redistribution of surplus. So we focus on, when we're designing permaculture systems, we focus on if we've got these different surpluses, whether that's in the form of excess compost or excess fruit, is how can we share that? How can we redistribute that surplus into our social communities, or how can we redistribute that excess carbon or compost within the system itself, or systems around us? And permaculture is so we got the main 3 ethics, which are care of the earth, care of the people, and then setting limits to consumption and redistribution of surplus. But then after that we follow down into the permaculture principles. Now, throughout the years, some people have taken the principles and kind of tweaked them or added them or renamed them. So there are lots of different explanations out there, but I like to use these permaculture principles, which are were written by David Holmgren in a book, I believe it's called Permaculture Principles. And he does a really good job of breaking these down into 12 different principles that we focus on and we think about whenever we are designing our landscape or designing our social systems. And so the first one is, and I've talked about, just briefly mentioned this already, is to observe and interact. So we need to observe and interact and be out and about in our systems that we are designing or working in. An example of this is a picture of someone's rural property. To the right of the photo is a driveway. And what I'm noticing based upon this is we are seeing some water pooling in this one section of the driveway. And so we're looking for these different things and the way that the water moves across the landscape, where the sun comes from, where people traffic comes from, or animal traffic comes from. And we try and recognize these, because if we recognize where the water is, maybe in excess, we can take that and spread it out to other parts of our system where we are deplete in water. And so we want to make sure that we are observing and interacting with our landscape. A common practice that we like to teach in our SLO PDC permaculture design certificate course is we like to have people do what we call a sit spot. So we'll have people go out to a part of their property, or if they don't own property, a park or something like that, and find a particular spot to sit and go out and sit in it throughout the year. So whether that's once a week or every 2 weeks, and spend, 20 minutes, half an hour sitting there and observing what's happening around you. Where's the wind coming from? Is there water flowing anywhere around you? Where's the wildlife? What's the wildlife doing in that area? And this allows us to kind of start learning about the different energies and how the natural ecosystemic functions are happening in our landscape. And then the second principle is the catch and store energy. So in our systems, if we design a solid permaculture system, we want to try and capture energy and hold it onto our landscape, or deflect negative energy away from our landscape. Examples of that up in the left-hand corner here is a series of water systems that were installed that are capturing and holding the water and allowing it to sink into the ground. So when we talk about storing energy, we're talking about water. We're also talking on the right here, in the top right-hand corner, is people energy. This is an event where an organization used their capital to bring people together to plant out a community garden for individuals who might not have the accessibility to do so. And so when we're talking about catching and storing energy, that's also on the social side, much like the master gardeners do as an organization. Down in the left-hand corner, this one is referring to sunlight. As you can see in this landscape, we've got multiple tiers, multiple different layers. We've got herbaceous layer down low. We've got more of a taller shrub layer up above that. And then in the background, we've got taller tree species. So a lot of the time in permaculture, we're really trying to design systems that harvest sunlight on multiple different levels as well, not just on a like a straight plane, and not just like a block of trees together, but maybe a block of trees, and then offset of the block of trees, we've got our shorter fruit shrubs. And then below that, we've got our raspberries or other different layers further down, all the way down to the ground. And then down in the right-hand corner, I like this one. This is a wind capturing image structure in Peru, which I've had the pleasure of getting to see. It's pretty cool. There's an underground canal, and with the way that these little depressions are shaped, it captures water, and then the water goes down and helps aerate the canal and keep it fresh and clean, and actually helps facilitate the movement of some of that water. So we're looking to catch and store energy when we're using permaculture to design our property or system. And obtain a yield. We are always looking to obtain yields from our system, whether that's food or whether that's doing this funky natural building sitting area where it's bringing people together to converse and interact with each other. So our systems are obtaining that yield. The whole point of us doing this is also to get something out of it, right? Whether that's food or our own personal enjoyment, or a place for us to relax and release stress. Then we also look to apply self-regulation and accept feedback. So I like this image on the left, right? Consume less and live more, right? And then also on the right here, this is a picture of a common strategy, water harvesting strategy that gets recognized a lot as permaculture, right? So this is a swale, which is a ditch that is dug, and it's on contour, and it's got a mound on the downside of that. And the idea is that it captures any water that's flowing across the landscape, holds it in the ditch, and allows it to sink into the ground, as opposed to it running off the site and running into the waterways. And sometimes when we do projects, we have issues. And so the issue with this swale is it has a breach. So water has made its way down into the swale onto the ditch, and then it broke through the swale mound, right? Whether that's because it was a really huge rain event right after it was made, or maybe somebody didn't properly size a spillway, which is a way to gently release water off of the end of the swale if the swale is at capacity. And so a big part of this is, okay, we've done something with our design and we've implemented a practice. Now let's observe that. How does it function? Is it working well for us? Do we need to tweak it at all? Is there something that we could do better next time we do it? And I always like to say, when we're doing this work is there are no, like, you can make mistakes, but they're just opportunities to accept feedback, right? And that's something that that's really important in our systems, because as we all know, everything in the world is constantly changing, whether it's the weather, whether it's, me getting older, whether it's our children getting older, that sort of thing. And so it's recognizing that happens. It's just how we interact with that and how we accept that feedback, if we can use it to our advantage. And then we use and value renewable resources and services. Now, a lot of times in permaculture, we focus on the natural ecosystem and the renewable resource services that these systems provide for us. Up in the top left-hand corner, this is just a wooded area. What this provides is habitat for wildlife, a place for people to go and relax and feel and relieve stress. It provides a great opportunity to positively infiltrate water down into the soil, into the landscape. Unfortunately, we don't have enough of these systems in our current landscape, and our water, our hydrological systems are all messed up. And so down in the left-hand corner, this is actually a wastewater treatment wetland. So it's a constructed wetland that is used to basically filter and clean wastewater. So this is, something that a sewage treatment facility normally would handle and clean, and it's actually being cleaned by this big constructed wetland. It's pretty cool. There are lots of different examples of these. There's some in California, some out east. And what we're finding is that in these systems, if they're done properly, they can clean the water as effectively as our mechanical filtration systems. And also at the same time, they can provide wildlife habitat as well. And then down on the right side, if we're in the farming kind of world, we might look at, okay, I'm going to raise chickens, right? Okay, but what kind of services can those chickens provide me? Well, they can go out and do bug patrol on my pasture. They can help add a different type of nutrients aside from my cattle on my pasture. You know, they can help clear and weed areas that I want to establish something new in. So we're always looking at how we can utilize these renewable resources that are around us: wind, solar, and all these different things, water power. We like to focus on how to utilize those and how to utilize the ones that that need the least amount of energy input in order to get energy out. And then produce no waste. And so our goal is, if we possible with our system, is to design a system where the byproducts of that system can get recycled back into the system, much like how the natural ecosystem functions. This can come in the form of, you know, reusing bottles as like little planters. It can come in the form of a gray water system, which handles water from the laundry or the shower or the sink, and that gets utilized out in the landscape. In our climate, a gray water system is much more tricky to design if you're going to use it year round, but it's definitely possible to have systems designed where you can have a gray water system like this, which has got a tank, you know, buried tank, and then emitters that feed fruit trees and other things in the warm season, right? And that can just get switched off in the cold season. And then on the left here, this is a composting toilet as well. And so while this is, you know, a touchy subject for a lot of people, we really do need to analyze how we're handling our own personal waste as well. And where is that going? Is it going and getting incinerated? Are we using tons and tons of electricity and energy in order to filter these things out? Is there a better way? People have, prior to, you know, the 1900s and everything, like there's lots of examples of people successfully doing composting systems as well with their own waste. Now everybody's got their own thing, but that's just one thing we like to bring up and talk about, because it's a real issue if we're going to try and live more in line with how the natural ecosystem operates. And then we always like to design from patterns to details. And so what this means is looking at the landscape, looking at the land, how it's shaped, and designing patterns from what the landscape is telling us. For example, this picture right here is of a farm down in Iowa, which unfortunately the gentleman who was running it had a falling out with the owner of the land, who he was doing like a lease to own thing, and it's not functioning anymore, which is too bad, because it's one of the best examples of permaculture farm or regenerative ag farm, whatever you want to call it. But basically what he's done is he's working with the valleys in the landscape and the ridges in the landscape, and then his planting rows corresponds with taking water from a place of lots of water in a valley and helping bring that out to the ridges where it's deplete. And so we want to look at the patterns of the landscape around us. Or there are lots of different patterns that exist in the natural world, whether that's like the wave form, or whether that's the dendritic pattern, which is apparent in trees, in our river systems, in our veins, in our brains. And so there's all these patterns that repeat themselves in nature. And if we can understand those patterns and design from those patterns to our details of, okay, we've got the pattern, now we know, okay, this is going to be a good place for, you know, our peach tree, or this is going to be a good place for a garden bed. If we can follow that line of thought, the idea is that we are harvesting and utilizing those patterns that nature has provided us with. And it can open up new ideas to us and new growing areas and new microclimates for us to grow in. And integrate rather than segregate. This is a big one. I absolutely love this photo. This is a photo of my friend Mike Hoag's previous property. And what you see here is lots of different stuff planted together. And it's amazing the amount of benefit you get from what you might know or refer to as companion planting. So he's got all kinds of fruits, vegetables, and fruiting plants, garden plants, mixed in with flowers. He's got herbs along the edges as a protective barrier to stop grass from creeping in. He's got comfrey, which is a great medicinal herb, as well as bees absolutely go nuts for it. It's a bioaccumulator. It's a great mulch plant. You can use it for activating compost. But basically the idea is we want to integrate rather than set pieces apart. The more components within our system that we can draw connections between, the more resilient our system is going to be. So a common one is, that we talk about is, chickens, right? How many different things can we get out of chickens? Well, chickens scratch, so they can provide us with weed control. Chickens poop, so they can provide us with nutrients. Chickens eat bugs. And so how do we utilize chickens within our system? Maybe we bring them into our gardens at the end of the year to help clean things up. Or maybe we bring them around the perimeter of our garden area to help kind of beat back grass and weeds. So we really focus on trying to integrate as many components of the system together. How many connections can we make, right? Life's about connections. The more you have, the better. And then also use small and slow solutions, right? So this one I have, maybe when I started out in the permaculture world and I've got my big bug eyes, like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And I want to do all these big projects and stuff like that. But the more and more I've learned and how I operate my business and interacting with my clients I'm really starting to pare back and be like, okay, so here might be the whole design, of your backyard. But this year we're going to focus on this little area, right? And what this allows us to do, it allows us to implement something successfully and care for it and maintain it in order to get the system going, so that we don't feel like, oh, I did this whole thing and I realized, oh my gosh, I only have an hour a weekend to take care of this stuff while it's establishing. And now, oh, the grass is overtaken and I'm feeling like overrun and disappointed. And so from the mental health side of things, using small and slow solutions are great because it allows us to have the time to properly take care of things and get things going. So on the left side, this is a water harvesting, little water harvesting feature with a little tiny raised bed berm that looks like it's been planted to some currants and some other things. And it looks like it's being fed by probably a rainwater downspout. And then on the right side, these are all smaller bare root trees. And so we tend to favor doing smaller trees or even planting seeds over putting in, big, $300, 8-foot tall trees, which there's nothing wrong with that if that's the route you want to go. But how I like to think about it is I could get that one $300 tree, or I could get, a 30 $10 smaller species and different things. So we want to think about how we can use small and slow solutions. And then we want to use and value diversity, right? So diversity is the key to having a sound system and a strong system. And an example of this is what's commonly referred to as like a flurd, which you're grazing sheep and cattle together, or maybe you're grazing cattle and then bringing the sheep right behind them in your rotation. And what this allows us to do is the cattle have their kind of thing that they like to eat, and then the sheep have their thing that they like to eat. And so it helps us kind of keep more even graze on all the different things, and not have the instance where, well, the cattle aren't really liking the shrubs that are coming in, so they're just going to continue to leave the shrubs, and then the shrubs grow up. This can also come in the form of on the social side of things, right? So the more diversity of ages, of experiences, of backgrounds, of cultures, of groups that you're a part of, the more possible solutions we are going to have to these things that we're trying, these big questions that we're trying to answer, and creating these stronger systems in order to support ourselves and take care of the earth, take care of people, and share our surpluses. We also talk a lot about using the edges and valuing the marginal. And so if you observe nature, where we find a lot of the most prolific systems in terms of biodiversity and energy storage and capture come on the edges. And so we see that a lot on maybe where a river flows into an ocean, right? Those estuaries are some of the most diverse and most ecologically the energy storage in those areas is super high. And an example of that has been was used and using the edges. This middle picture is what's referred to as the Chinampas, and they're located. They still are. They're located down in Mexico City, and what they were basically these peninsulas, and with channels of water on either side. I guess you could call them like the original wicking beds, right? Where they were growing crops in between, and then they would grow tree species on the outside of those peninsulas in order to kind of hold things together. And it allowed them to utilize a nutrient in those water channels and do so in a way where they didn't have to worry about watering stuff all the time. Another example of using an edge is this type of a market where you've got lots of small vendors offering different services or different items, right? And so that leads to more creation, more exposure to different new ideas, as well as creating new connections. And then down on the right-hand corner here, this is in Kansas City, and it's been a while since I've used that image, but it's an organization down there that has moved into a very degraded neighborhood, where there's lots of houses that were, abandoned and everything like that. And then they use social capital in order to build this amazing like a whole block of food to feed the community. They've got solar panels down here. They've got a big building that they renovated as like a maker space and work with local school districts. People that in this community who had been previously maybe making poor choices and having to resort to going into buildings and pulling out copper pipes to sell and stuff like that. Some of these people eventually got employed by this organization, and they're rebuilding all these houses. And so we can use these edges to create great diversity. So, and then we want to creatively use and respond to change. And so an example of this is something that my family tries to do as best we can, but we trying to eat with the seasons. And this one, I like the outlay of this one. I believe this is not necessarily from our climate, but I just really enjoyed how they laid this out. So in their climate in the summer, they've got their food is duck and grouse and rabbits and squirrel and venison, wild boar. And then so that's kind of like their meat layer. And then down they've got other veggies like lettuce and onions and peas and cucumbers. And then we shift over into the winter, and they've got, garlic and carrots and more of their root veggies, as well as, still being able to eat some of the meat species as well. So we want to try and, with the change of the seasons, with the change of our habits, with the change of our families growing, we want to look at that and how can we utilize that as a benefit rather than looking at it as, oh my gosh, this is changing and I don't know how to deal with this, right? A lot of times these changes can have a really good positive effect on us. Okay, so those are the 12 principles. And just so you all know, this is like a lot of information, right? So this is my goal here, is just to kind of get you starting to think about some of this stuff, right? And then I'm going to provide resources and links at the end. And I believe Jill and Tom and Mary Lou have this presentation in PDF form. If they haven't already emailed that out to you, we'll get it emailed out to you so you can follow. But basically, what I'm trying to do is just get you kind of, started on it. So if you feel overwhelmed, that's okay. And I'm kind of cruising through this and as a goal to get to the end to answer questions if anybody has them, because that's more fun than, for me to answer questions and interact than, just talking about what's on the slides here. So those are the principles that we try and utilize in permaculture. But now I want to kind of talk about some of the analysis strategies that I use and that we use in permaculture to impact our design. And one of the most important ones that we use is something that's called sector analysis. And what that means is for any given property or home or that we're looking at designing, we want to try and map out where the energies are coming from and what times of the year those energies are coming from in our landscape. A common one that that master gardeners are probably very familiar with is light, right? Is sunlight. We need to know, okay, in the summertime, and this area is getting, this many hours of light. Okay, that means that these are going to be, shade loving plants. So we have to recognize where the sunlight is moving and coming through the landscape, and vice versa on the winter time. Like, okay, well, we know that the sun is really low in the winter. So one of the things that we've done here on our outbuilding, which is our office space and our workshop, is I've oriented the building to face the south. And I have overhangs and I've sized the glazing on the south side to capture that solar energy in the summer, and then in the winter. And then in the summer, the sun is up and above the building, so it's not coming down and hitting through the windows, and it's avoiding the heating that I don't want in the summer. Some other different energies that we look at and create, and like this one out here, this one probably is not for our area, but could be as a fire sector. So, okay, in the hot summer, the winds are coming from this way, and this might be the area that we need to realize that fire might come onto our landscape. Okay, what strategies can we use? Where can we put fire breaks along this area? And another example with this is the wildlife sector. On this one, it's like all around, right? On my property, I've actually kind of I've got an idea of where the deer are, where the major deer highways are throughout the landscape, and how does that affect where we're planting things, fruit trees or other things. Although where I'm at, it doesn't matter where you plant stuff, deer usually get to it. But this can also account for if you're in an urban setting, like, okay, we've got a sidewalk that comes along here on a major road, and maybe we want to invite, people to observe and look at and provide them some aesthetic beauty. And so on this part along that sidewalk, we're going to plant some really beautiful flowers, and we're going to try and focus on having blooms throughout the whole year. Another one for urban as well as, I guess, suburban and rural is like noise. Okay, is there a highway somewhere on one side of our property that maybe we want to plant some pines along that line in order to block some of that sound? Or I want to put in a water feature with a water fountain to create some gurgling and running water noise in order to kind of mask some of that noise that we want to avoid. So we're looking at the different things and where's the wind coming from in different parts of the year? Where's the water entering my property? Or where is it then, flowing through or exiting the property? So we want to understand those different energies and how they move across our landscape. And then another design strategy that we like to use is something we call zone analysis. And this is a simple example of it where it's just emanating circles. But the idea is this center is like us. And then the zone 0 is like our house, or maybe our, on here it has settlement. And then out from there, we might look at the things that we frequent the most. And so kitchen gardens, these are great places for microclimates. Herbs for using and cooking are great to be located closer to the house. And then out from there, we might move to things such as more of the food production, our garden beds, any market crops we might have, greenhouses, and then emanating out further from there, where we might frequent a little less, might be fruit and nut trees, pasture. On here, they have cash crops. And then out from there, we have zone 4, which we might have as kind of like a more pasture, or maybe it's where we go to cut our wood for heating our homes. And these are less frequented. And then finally out in zone 5 is more of like the wildness, like our wilderness zone. And even places in the city, I've got my mentor, Kate, she's got a corner of her back lot that abuts up to a parkway and a waterway, and that little strip back there, she refers to her as her wilderness zone, her wild zone, where she's just kind of letting nature do its thing back there. But the idea is the things that we need to manage more frequently or visit more frequently, we want to try and locate them closer to the house or closer to a walkway that we frequent, right? And this is my friend Sue's property in Madison, Wisconsin. I put in a series of ponds for her. This is her zone analysis. So when we think about the zone analysis, it doesn't have to be concentric circles emanating out, especially on a smaller lot, right, where it doesn't take as long to get out to. And so she's got her zone 0 as the house, zone 1 where she's got her veggie gardens, and a lot of she's got an herb spiral here, her hoop house where she's has a couple potbelly pigs and some chickens and ducks. And then her zone 2 is out over here. These are kind of like some more of her like fruit and nut trees out here. And then her zone 3 is her ponds. And then she's got some other zones, zone 3 is out in the corners. Her zone 2 does extend down here. Because she does a lot for inviting her neighbors and community to come in and be part of her landscape. And so she's got like a seating area where they get to hang out and do talks and everything like that. And so it's good to understand those zones, and the zones will change also depending upon like where access pathways are, or like where how your property is shaped, right? That'll dictate where things are placed as well. But just to get the idea of thinking, okay, things I need to frequent more often, I need to put closer if I can, and emanate out from there. This is, I like to refer to the Gregarians platform because it is the design process that I use when working with clients. And while they don't precisely refer to themselves as in the permaculture world, like it's very similar into what they're trying to do. And what I like about it, they lay out a nice concrete way to go about, okay, so now I know all these different principles, and I know all these different ethics, and I know how to analyze, the energies, and I understand zoning and how we want to try and roll that. But now, like when it comes to actually doing the design, what steps do I need to take? And so I'll just go through this kind of quickly. But the first step is the climate. Actually, what I should do is I'm going to scoot down to this slide, because they've got this organized in a way that the number one thing that you start with is something that's the most difficult to change in terms of energy effort, and it's the more permanent, right? And so climate is one, even though we've got some of that is changing and it's constantly changing around us. For the most part, we've got 4 seasons, right? And we've got expected, temperatures in the winter time based upon our hardiness zone. And so they like to start with the climate and then work their way down, because in this order, once we get down here into this corner, these things are the less permanent and the easier to influence. And so I just wanted to jump forward on that, just to show that for understanding. And so what we talk about first is the climate, right? What climate do we live in? We have limitations based upon what we can grow here, based upon how cold it gets in the winter, how much rain we receive throughout the year. and our moist, humid summers, those different types of things. But then also the climate of the mind, right? That's another important one. A lot of times I refer to social permaculture when I'm talking about permaculture, because it's my personal opinion that the on the ground, the planting things, the doing gardens and growing food in a way that's good for the environment, creating habitat, that's the easy stuff. It's the people and the people interactions with each other that is the most difficult thing to navigate and can get the most trying at times. And so when I'm working with my clients, I want to understand where their climate of the mind is. How much time do they have realistically throughout the week to work on the property if I'm going to design something for them? I don't want to design something for them that requires 10 hours of work a week and they only have one. And so I'm constantly analyzing, okay, let's be realistic here. And not that this can't change over time and we can't, evolve this, but if you only have 1 hour a week to work on this, I'm not going to design something for you that requires more work. Next, I'm going to look at the geography of the land. How is their property sloped? This is a really, really important component. And it's kind of it leads to all the different interactions with the physical elements. Is it really, really rocky in this area? Is there a big hill over here that's preventing some of the sunlight from hitting, the north side of a slope, right? So we want to look at the geography. And then next, I'll look at water. How's the water flowing across the landscape? How can I utilize water? Maybe by putting in some natural dams or ponds. How can I use and transport water in areas where there's a lot to where there's less? And then next from there, then once I have my water layer designed in, then I can look at putting access pathways in, whether that's walking paths or driving paths. I work with, urban property owners and people who own, 50, 60 acres even. And so, but this all can be applied to all those different levels. Then I'm going to look at what they have on here is referred to as forestry. They've since, they haven't updated this graphic yet, but they refer to this more of like their ecosystem process or ecosystems. And so trees, plants, where is the grazing area going to be? Where is our, cash crops going to be? Are we going to do a market garden somewhere? Are we going to do, flower gardens? All those different things come next after we've figured out where access pathways are, where water is. Then we can start chunking up these different areas to the different types of vegetation that we're going to grow. Then from there, we can look at placing buildings on the landscape because we've got our access pathways. And so we can figure out good spots for our buildings. And then once we have our buildings, we can look at doing fencing. Do we need a deer fencing to keep deer out of our garden? Do we need rabbit fencing to keep deer out of our flower patches or our garden beds, our backyards, our food forests? And then after that, we can look at, okay, we've kind of got these areas subdivided. Now we can look at the different soils that are in those areas and how we need to amend those soils, or what we refer to as try and bring back the soil biology in those soils. And then from there, looking at economy, are you going to be producing any money off of your property? And how can we design that? And then lastly is energy. Okay, so how are we going to utilize energy in our landscape? Are we going to do solar? Are we going to do wind? Are we going to do wood, gas? Are we going to, how are we going to use the energy in our system? Because now we've got our buildings located. Now we can place the solar on the building if we need to. And it's not saying that we don't think about these other components while we're designing the specific layers in their order, but if we design in this order, it leads to a more successfully laid out design. So, and now I'm just gonna kind of go just show a couple pictures of some projects that I've worked on and designed. This is for Gibbs Pizza and Gibbs and Grandpa's Pizza in Madison. It's a small backyard behind the businesses. They've got lots of water coming off the roof here. And up here, we created basically a snaking swale system that actually feeds down into a couple of bermed patties that are planted with pawpaws, which are we can grow them now up in Madison in our area because of things have warmed up a bit, but they're found more in Illinois and Iowa and kind of that range on in the Midwest. But it produces a really awesome almost subtropical fruit in our climate. They're wonderful. And it's underplanted the first year with a cover crop of clover. But the idea is that this is creating an opportunity for people who are eating at these different places or frequenting these different places to see different examples. Okay, look at this is how we can take this storm water, this rain that's falling on the roof, and sink it down into the ground and filter it rather than having it go right into the street and then down into the lakes. And so we talk a lot in permaculture about slow it, spread it, and sink it when it comes to water. That's one of our mantras. So here is our garden on our property, our annual veggie garden. And as you can see, we like to interplant lots of stuff. So we've got onions and cabbages planted together and potatoes. We've got one that I really enjoy doing now is in the springtime when my garlic starts popping up through the straw. I get my little lettuce seeds, my lettuce starts, and I interplant in between the garlic with my lettuce, and I found that that works really well. It utilizes space really effectively. But our gardens are no-till, no dig minus, when we dig potatoes. So our gardens are never tilled. And the reason behind that is for us is for our soil microbiology. We focused a lot on not killing soil microbiology and working with it. We create our compost on site that we use to amend. We do lots of straw mulching, as well as sometimes hay mulching. And I know some people, oh, hay's got lots of seeds and everything. But what we found, as long as we do a good job of staying on top of any weeding or adding more mulch on top, we've had good success with that. But as you can see, we've got lots of different, we've got dill planted in here, we've got fennel in here. And so we focus a lot on disturbing the ground as little as we can in interplanting. And this, our rows are kind of built in coordination with the landscape in order to harvest any water that falls on our garden bed. And I can honestly say that anything that in any of the rain events that we have, our soils to the point where we just, it soaks right in. This is just a design. This is a design that I completed for a client of mine on a larger scale. But as you can see, I've got different water features in here, ponds. And along with that, this is all terraced down to the pond. So it's kind of like a terrace step down into the pond. And on these terraces are a huge variety of fruit trees, berries, willows, all kinds of different diversity. I like to focus a lot on planting lots and lots of diversity. And then over on these more open areas, he wanted an area to take his chickens through. And so we've got different things like honey locust and oaks, and let's see what else we have here. We've got fruit trees, apples, pears, and while they're still in straight rows, they are placed in a way that takes water and moves it out to a more drier ridge. And then the yellow is all these the axis paths that we're designing into that. So, and part of this is a beauty thing, right? Shaping the land. He owns an excavator and he likes being out on his excavator. And so part of this is getting into his climate of mind. Like he likes doing these things. And so, for some people, my design might not include all this terracing and ponding and stuff like that. But for him, that's what he really likes to do. And he has the equipment to do so. And then this is a living swimming pool that I installed. It would have been, I finished it not this last November, but the November before. But this is a picture taken in the summer of last year. And this client of mine was interested in installing a swimming pool. And then she learned about natural living swimming pools, and she was connected with me. And so I kind of told her what they're about and how they utilize biology and bacteria and the plants to clean the water, and simple aeration systems run off of a air compressor to help circulate and move the water. And so instead of a big concrete pool that they were thinking about putting in, we used an excavator to shape the ground, and then we used a heavy duty liner, and then we placed rocks as our kind of border, and in order to create these retaining walls for pea gravel, which is our growing substrate for our plants. And so this has been it's been amazing going back there this past year and seeing all the birds. Like, she sent me a video of her in the shallow area watching and videotaping, and a bat comes down and drinks water off the top of the swimming pool. And so while some might feel that, we're putting in a big plastic liner and everything, for me, sometimes it's working with my clients and where their climate of mind is okay, well, at least it's not concrete, right? Concrete is just a very bad resource to use in terms of energy consumption of that. So this is kind of less bad. So sometimes, while we couldn't put in a natural pond based upon our test digs and the soil that we found in there, we try and if they're really gung-ho about that, we'll just do the best that we can. So and this is my Aunt Kathy and Uncle Pat are probably on this call as well. And I installed a living pond for them as well at their place too. So so just to kind of, in conclusion, some events that I always suggest people check out is the Wisconsin Permaculture Convergence, which I coordinate, as well as the Madison Area Permaculture Guild SLOW PDC. And I really like this because it's a permaculture design certificate course, but we call it the SLOW PDC because we're using the slow and small solutions, right? But it's very much like we've got 4 base classes that everybody needs to take, and we offer those classes in like on a weekend through like 4 weekends, twice a year. So people can take those base classes. And once they have those base classes, then we've got all these different other badges, almost kind of like the Girl Scout or Boy Scout setup that people can take in order to earn what normally would be like a 72-hour, 5-day or 6-day course that they need to go to and take to get their permaculture design certificate. They can kind of take it at their own pace. And so I highly recommend people check that out. It's a great opportunity. The classes are like $25 a piece, I think right now, or $30 a piece. So it's quite affordable. And I love teaching those. And it allows us to constantly evolve our materials as well. And then here are some resources. I won't go over these in detail. This will be sent out to you so you can check these out. The Guy's Garden Earth User's Guide to Permaculture are really, and Permaculture City is pretty cool, are really great like intro to permaculture books that are super accessible, easy to read as well. But these other ones are really useful and great. There's so many good resources out there. And then here are some of the websites to check out. So the Madison Guild, the Convergence, the Permaculture Principles is David Holmgren's website. Regrarians is awesome. That's a good one. That's tends to focus on a little bit more like broad scale, like agricultural, larger properties, but that's good. Discover Permaculture is a good one as well. And I guess, just to close up, I think we're at 8 o'clock. And so I just wanted to maybe open it up to some questions.
All right, if you got questions, drop them in the Q&A box down there. And also I do have that PDF, but Zoom does not let me share a PDF on Moss, and it does not save your email addresses. So if you are interested in having that, you should send me an email, jvanning@kimberlypubliclibrary.org, which is in your Zoom, what you came in with. It'll be in there, and you can ask me for the copy and I can email it to you separately.
And I believe it will also be posted on the Outagamie County Master Gardener's website. So if you go to our website, you should be able to find it there.
You
One
can,
comment I would like to make when you're talking about zoning,
Mhm.
excuse me. About 10 years ago at a Master Gardener conference, I went to a talk on medieval gardening. And it was just sort of carbon copy of what you're talking about zoning
Mhm.
and how frequently you use things. The more frequent stuff is closer to the front door.
Mhm.
The less you use them, it's further away. So a lot of this stuff, I think, is basically logic. You know, can you comment on, you know, historically how people have used water management and
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, and absolutely, Tom. Like I like to think of, you know, we call it, this is referred to as permaculture, right? And that's a term, but a lot of these strategies are basically being, you know, brought back from previous cultures who have used these, you know, whether it's, you know, utilizing aqueducts or terracing, you know, that's all over in Asia, or terracing down in South America. A lot of this stuff is what I'm feeling is, unfortunately, this is a lot of knowledge that we have forgotten. And in permaculture, and we present it this way, it's really just a way to like reintroduce, you know, people to these practices that, yeah, have been used frequently in cultural past. Absolutely, you're spot on. It's just, you know, we use it in this way as just as a teaching tool, right? And that's why when I, at the beginning of the talk, I said I want to say thanks to, you know, the people who have come before me, right? Because a lot of this information is just, maybe it's been skipped being passed down, you know, for 3 or 4 or 5 generations. So because when I grew up, I didn't know about any of this. I wasn't taught any of this in school, you know. Like my family did do some gardening, but it's almost like rediscovering some of these lost arts and these lost ways of working with nature. Absolutely.
well, we don't have any open questions yet. Last call for questions if you have any, on anything that he's talked about, which was a lot of information.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of the water though, to slow it and spread it and sink it. I liked that.
Yeah, no, it's a nice easy mantra to, you know, to break it down. And when, like, I'll just give an example in like an urban setting or a smaller lot size setting. When we talk about starting at the top of our watershed, and we always want to start at the top of our watershed and work our way down. And so for those situations, our top of our watershed is our roof, right? And our rainwater capturing, right? And so maybe the first thing we have off of our roof is a rain barrel. And then the next thing we do is we've got an overflow on that rain barrel that maybe takes it along through a swale that then sinks it down into the ground, and below slope on that we've got fruit trees and berries planted, and then maybe we've got an overflow on that, so when that swale fills up, it fills up a natural pond next to it, and then when that pond fills up, that overflows maybe down into another set of swales lower down on the landscape, feeding another component of our property. And if we can take another way to think about it is, we want to take the water across the longest path as slow as possible throughout our landscape. Because if we can sink that down into the ground, it's going to recharge our groundwater aquifers. It's going to help clean that water as well. One thing we forget about is our biological systems are really, really good at cleaning things, whether that's our soil biology or our plants that we've planted or a wetland ecosystem that we might have installed. And so, yeah, that's such a huge part. And personally, it's one of my favorite parts of working and doing designs is working with water. I've always kind of been drawn to it, whether it was, fishing off of our driveway in the springtime when our ditches filled up from spring runoff or things like that. I've always been drawn to it. And I think a lot of people are. There's something, evolutionarily for us that we're drawn to water. And it's such an important part.
So Deborah has a question. I'm worried about the amount of farmland that is being converted to new housing developments. What does permaculture philosophy have to say about that?
Yeah. So part of that, is that kind of goes into the social side of permaculture, right? With our how our governances are put together and different things like that. I agree that we are losing lots of farmland. What I like to do is I like to try and turn things on, take a negative and kind of turn it into a positive, in a sense that, okay, if this is happening and we can't stop it, how can we design those neighborhoods to utilize that resource, that farmland, properly, right? Can we design an agri-hood where we offer houses that have a central area with community garden space? Can we make sure that when they put in those divisions, those housing divisions and everything, they don't just scrape off all the topsoil and sell it, and then just sprinkle on some topsoil on top of the lower stuff? I think that's part of that is we've got in our concept of how a lot of times people are referring, well, we need to concentrate people in cities in order to save landscape around us. That, for me, that is under the assumption that humans are going to have a negative impact on the environment. And one of the only ways that I stay positive and look to the future and have hope for my children and everything is that I try and flip that and say that, well, humans can have an awesome impact on the environment. We hear all the time about how humans are destroying habitat and biodiversity and everything like that, but we don't hear enough about the stories of people bringing back biodiversity and revitalizing our ecosystems. And I think some might argue that in order for people to get that connection back with nature, they need to be out in nature. They need to be out on the landscape, not in big tight cities packed together. And so, that's a big question. That's might be one that you could look at checking out, like the Permaculture City by Toby Hemingway. He was kind of a proponent of suburban kind of living or city living with people, and how we can do it that way. Where there are other people in the permaculture world who feel like we need people to move back out onto the landscape and become involved in it again, and not have a few people owning millions and millions of acres, but we need more people owning smaller portions of acreage to get people reintroduced to those ecosystems. So I guess that's not like a complete straightforward answer on that question, but I think I talked a little bit about that. But yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So that's all the questions that we have. Thank you, Drew, for being here with us today and introducing us to permaculture and its practices. And it was I learned a lot.
Great. Yeah. And if anybody, like I mentioned at the beginning, and I think I'm still sharing my screen here, but you'll have this, but please feel free to reach out to me if you want to learn more, or you want more resources, or you need connections or anything like that. My phone is always on, and my email is always being read. And if you want some help, I'd be a terrible business owner if I didn't, promote, if you would like help designing your property or components of your property, let me know. I can help you out with that. As well as if you want some holistically managed beef in quarters or halves or whole shares, we do still have some available, and we'll have some this coming year too. So but yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you all having me, and reach out to me if you need any other additional information.
Another option, in addition to contacting Drew, is if you want to have any gardening questions, you can always contact Gardener SOS And you can get to that through the Outagamie Master Gardeners website.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you for being here. I'm going to end this webinar and we will see you next month. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.